Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
Red light is very beneficial. Like if you get in front of your red light panel, you may notice that your veins in your feet and your arms, they start to surface. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize I had veins in my hands and my feet like that. Well, what's happening is your veins and arteries, they actually have something called a chromophore, which is a light receptor. So whenever you get exposed to red light, the veins in the arteries vasodilate, they open up. And if you improve blood flow, you can actually start to improve function. So let's say someone has pain in their hands or arthritis. And what happens is when the weather gets really cold, now they start noticing more pain because cold is going to constrict your arteries, and then heat is going to vasodilate, open them up. So the more blood flow that you get into these muscles and these joints and these nerves and even organs, the better function you have. And that's what happens with red light exposure.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed Dr. Kyle Daigle. With a fellowship in childhood developmental and behavioral disorders, he's changing the game in healthcare. Dr. Daigle's passion for health and wellness extends to lecturing all around the world on topics like traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, mold exposure, and childhood development. We touched on the benefits of red light therapy, Dr. Kyle's morning routine, the power of visualizing your future, enhancing sleep through magnetic sleep pads, and his one tip to get your body and mind back to what it once was. I really enjoyed my interview with Dr. Kyle. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have Dr. Kyle Daigle on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for coming on. We're going to touch on a lot of topics today, so I'm excited to have you here. And you're not in Dubai now. I know you said, are you in Louisiana?
Yeah, I'm in Louisiana right now.
Okay, and maybe give the audience a little background, how you got into sort of alternative holistic medicine and what sort of led you down that path.
Yeah, well, I actually had a young brother that ended up getting a medical procedure that almost died. I spent 6 weeks in the hospital in ice baths, and I watched this doctor save my brother's life, and I watched my dad hug this doctor, and really just watching the way that my dad was just so compelling and just thankful for this doctor saving his life. I was like, that's what I want to do. So since second grade, I had the intention to be a doctor, but my pursuit was actually oncology, pediatric oncology. Went into LSU in undergrad, dived into research, student research assistant. And that, led me into the nutritional aspect. So I decided to not go to med school. Went into alternative medicine. And in that, I decided to take chiropractic because at the time when I was in school, chiropractors had direct access where, you can just basically go into a chiropractor without a diagnosis. They could diagnose you versus a PT. You had to go to a medical doctor, get a script to actually go do PT. So that's what really got me into chiropractic. And then in there, it was really neat because I had the opportunity to be trained by a lot of really amazing doctors, like one guy named Dr. Brandon Brock, who was teaching me about, traumatic brain injuries. And then I learned from a guy named Atiz Karazian, who was talking about this gut-brain connection on how you can really help out, a lot of patients' autoimmune issues, all this by cleaning up people's diet and their gut. And then that led me into, open a private practice. I actually had a severe traumatic brain injury in 2013 that really kind of got me into, I was doing sports performance, got me into traumatic brain injury rehab, mainly because I wanted to fix myself. And in doing that, that led me into actually going into childhood development. My previous history is I had ADHD as a child, pretty severe, medicated for about 18 years. And that actually had a part of actually my recovery in TBI rehab. So then I started studying something called primitive reflexes. These are infant reflexes that allow the brain to develop. And I actually found that to be a massive secret into TBI world on how to recover. And then, I just started trying to look into biohacking, just ways that, because I was on medications for 18 years, I wanted to find ways that I could possibly try to reduce the stress response. And I just pulled it all together from studying red light, studying PMF, transcranial direct, nutrition, primitive reflexes, oxygen therapy, saunas. And now I have this really kind of state-of-the-art treatment where people fly from all over the world to come and see me because I basically have been able to basically structure a really intense rehab program with lots of different diversity of therapies.
Yeah, wow. Interesting. And so you've gone sort of into different paths that have led, first starting out with like maybe traumatic brain injuries, and then it sort of led you down different paths.
Yep.
And I notice you talk about like vibration therapy and low powered lasers. I'm curious, how do those play a role in your practice?
Yeah, well, I'm a nerd, man. I don't watch TV. I read a lot of research, and what really intrigued me was I got into this type of therapy, this field called functional neurology, which is how you can basically stimulate the brain, whether it was through colors, the eyes, eye movements. But vibration therapy really intrigued me whenever I started looking into the spinal cord, because the back half of the spinal cord has a specific pathway. It's called the DCML pathway, and it's specific for vibration. And what's interesting about vibration is that it actually really drives an area of the brain called the parietal lobe, which is your spatial map. So, young kids who, for example, have like poor proprioception, they'll walk into things, will actually physically vibrate their body a lot. And what happens is their brain becomes aware of where they are in space. And that translates into paralysis. People who have brain injuries, is that if you actually use vibration therapy, for example, on a paralyzed arm, then the brain itself starts getting a better awareness of where that arm is in space, and you get better control.
Hmm. And I notice on your Instagram, you post a lot of like your stories. Are there like a couple, like maybe one or two stories that sort of stick out that you've helped someone through the years?
Yeah, well, I just had a guy today. I've been working him for about a year now. He was a spinal cord patient that he was pressure washing his boat, and he slipped and fell and landed on his back, and he fractured his T10 spine, and he got diagnosed what's called an Asia A quad. Pretty much that means that's a pretty poor prognosis. You're not really going to basically be able to really move and walk.
Hmm.
And so this guy tells me, he says, look, I'm a diesel mechanic. I have a young daughter. I want to walk her down the aisle, and I do not want to be confined to this wheelchair. And, I tap into everything. I'm into, mindset. I'm into meditation. I'm into visualization. So we kind of threw it all. I said, look, I'm going to basically tell you that, the neurologists and all those guys can tell you that you're probably never going to walk. I said, but there's another aspect that if you really truly want to walk, what we have to do is basically tap into all the powers within mindset. We have to literally rehab every single spinal pathway that literally is going to connect from your spine to your brain. And there's a lot of different, different pathways like cold plunge we were talking about earlier, vibration, music, metronomes, rhythmic movements, vibration. And so I was showing him, I was like, look, man, this is what we're going to do. We're going to literally every day, we're going to basically try to target these pathways. And the cool thing is that we were able to take this guy from complete paralysis from the waist down to today. He's now driving. He told me today, it was actually his wife. She said that he went from an Asia A quad to an Asia D quad. But he now has full functioning of both limbs. He's walking on a 4-pronged walker, but he's got his life back. And, it's cool because neurologists will tell patients, don't go and do this alternative therapy. It's not going to work. But they realize that if you don't do anything, you're never going to go anywhere. Or if you don't use it, you lose it. So a lot of these people realize that there's a lot more than just taking a pill. And that's where people start coming to see me. But what really drives a lot of these patients in to see me is I do post these videos, and really they're just designed to basically show people out there that are struggling that no matter what you have going on, that there's still a potential and there's still a chance. But a lot of times you got to kind of tap into some of these, it's all scientific. It might kind of look a little crazy, but, everything we do is based by research. So that was one case. I do a lot of traumatic brain injury rehab. So I've been able to help, like I have a kid from Northern California that when I got him, he fell off of a horse and he had his legs like stuck together. And, goal for him was to be able to get on a horse, to be able to rope again, and to be able to walk. And I have this guy basically on a horse. I have him roping. I have him walking. So again, it's lots of cool cases. And then, I have a really cool story on Instagram I posted of this guy who had 3 days to live in liver failure with a brain infection. And he was on hospice, which I didn't know he was in hospice because he failed to mention that to me. And then after doing a bunch of red light therapy, and we actually use a lot of magnets or PMFs, we were able to get this guy to now 2 years later, he's running a construction company, and he had 7 days to live.
Wow. And he reached out to you, and that puts you in. I guess he had nothing to lose really, other than I'm sure it sounds like some of these people really, what do they? They have nothing to. It's almost like you're the last resort to some of these people, right? As far as getting their health back, or even just being able to live a quality life.
Yeah, we just had, a lot of times patients, I typically, an average, usually my patient files, like most of my patients typically have seen at least 10 to about 43 other practitioners before they make the jump to come see me. Yeah. And I'll touch on one last case I just had. So I had a young girl from Sydney, or from Australia. I got her, she had what's called CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome. And POTS. So she was passing out between 200 to 500 times a day, which sounds astronomically high, which it is. She was having 3 to 5 seizures a day, and she lost the ability to walk. And her pain was so excruciating that like morphine, Dilaudid, Seroquel wouldn't touch it. And her visas were actually expiring December 1st, and I got her October 1st. And I had to basically reduce her seizures, get her to no longer pass out, hopefully get her up out of a wheelchair walking. And we were successfully able to use every aspect of our treatment. And she walked out of our clinic last Wednesday, actually did a cartwheel. She walked out of there. She donated her wheelchair to us. She hasn't had a seizure in about 4 weeks, and hasn't had a syncope, which is passing out episode, in about 2.5 weeks. So, we see some of the wildest things, but I think the thing, people that are probably listening is, well, how in the world are you doing this magical work? And it's really not magic. It's basically, no one really is looking at someone from a comprehensive standpoint. And for us, everything actually starts with, we call it a QEEG. So we actually do an EEG of the brain, and we look at all your brainwave activity. And then from there, I have an idea of what parts of the brain are working, what aren't, what parts are hyperactive. And then I start, adding in all this sensory stimulation to start getting the brain in a better shape. And then we get into all the labs and, mindset and, basically physical exercise.
Wow, that's amazing work. And before we got on, we were talking a little bit about red light. So I feel like we should maybe go down that path for a little bit. Because I was mentioning to you, I bought a red light. It's probably been a year and a half, and used it from time to time. But I'm just curious to know what type of things that you've seen that red light could be beneficial for people.
Yeah, well, I tell people, I always start my clinic with first the equation by Albert Einstein: E equals MC squared. So basically, energy equals mass, but I break mass down to mass of every cell in your body, times the speed of light. And it's not just light, it's the diversity of light, like all the different colors of the spectrum. So if you take an average individual, most people basically need a lot of caffeine in the morning. They need energy drinks. They got to take a bunch of B vitamins just to be able to have energy to basically function. And the question to that is, well, why is that happening? And why is, so many people are having to consume so much caffeine? And the answer to that, in my clinical opinion, is basically, if you look at our light exposure, that most of us live all indoors. People basically stay inside all day long. They work, in cubicles or in buildings, and they're all under artificial light. And we don't really get a lot of, outside sunlight time besides basically maybe going for an early morning jog if people do that. Maybe going from the parking garage to your vehicle, from parking garage to your office, or even in the evening time, a lot of people work late. So we're under all these light. And the sun, for example, has all these massive array of colors that it produces in the spectrum. But a human being in today's society is really only being exposed to blue light. And when you really look at blue light, there's a lot of blue light filter glasses. They're showing that blue light can actually cause a lot of stress and sleep disturbances and even weight gain. Even people who get exposed to blue light excessively have an issue breaking down carbohydrates. And then you look at red light, and red light is very beneficial because red light actually improves energy. It improves blood flow. It reduces inflammation. It can actually help out normalize people's sleep cycle. And when you look at all the symptoms people have, it's like every, symptom of basically a red light, deficit. And then you look at blue light toxicity and you see all these symptoms match up. So what's really happening is blue light is way over here on the left end of the color spectrum, and red is way over here. And the more red light you get, you actually can negate a lot of this blue light exposure. So, my partner, Dr. Brandon Crawford, we actually own something called NeuroSolution. It's a laser. We actually own a red light company where we sell these lasers and red light panels all over. But we also teach these doctors about how to use it. And red light is very beneficial. Like if you get in front of your red light panel, you may notice that your veins in your feet and your arms, they start to surface. And you're like, wow, I didn't realize I had veins in my hands and my feet like that. Well, what's happening is your veins and arteries, they actually have something called a chromophore, which is a light receptor. So whenever you get exposed to red light, the veins and the arteries vasodilate, they open up. And if you improve blood flow, you can actually start to improve function. So let's say someone has pain in their hands or arthritis. And what happens is when the weather gets really cold, now they start noticing more pain because cold is going to constrict your arteries, and then heat is going to vasodilate, open them up. So the more blood flow that you get into these muscles and these joints and these nerves and even organs, the better function you have. And that's what happens with red light exposure. So, my favorite applications to red light is actually over the head. I love it on the head because of your scalp is actually has chromophores in it. So light receptors increase blood flow. I also like red light to the face. Very interesting about, what's going on is something called building sickness syndrome is, a lot of the air quality control people work in a lot of old buildings that actually have what's called mycotoxins, mold in them. And mold is actually basically, getting stuck or getting coagulated in people's sinuses, and your sinuses can directly impact your brain, your equilibrium, and then also your gut function. So, getting blood flow to your actual face and your sinuses can help out. The other thing is your carotid arteries. Your carotid arteries are on the front side of your neck, which actually give blood flow to your frontal lobes. And then you have red light to the back of the head or the back of the neck, which activates something called your vertebral artery, which is going to supply blood flow to your brainstem, which is where most of your cranial nerves come from, your eyes, your face, your mouth, your tongue, your stomach, which is amazing because that's where your gut function is and all your vital organs are, and then your back, and then also the hands and the feet. So those are some kind of, people have a red light out there listening. Those are some really neat little spots that you can actually do because, again, the better blood flow you get, the better function you get. And being exposed to red light can be extremely beneficial for reducing inflammation, improving energy, improving overall oxygen supply. So if you look at someone's pulse ox, they might have a 95% oxygen, meaning they're only absorbing 95% of oxygen, and you get exposed to red light and you see it increase. So the more oxygen consumption you have, the better brain function and organ and muscle function you're going to have.
Yeah, I mean, this keeps coming up, red light therapy, and it's become more popular. Obviously, there's companies now, quite a bit more companies selling these devices. Would you say that like exposure to red light, like 15, 20 minutes a day is probably a good barometer for doing it? Or
yeah. It's just like being outside. So, at least people need to get at least 15 to 30 plus minutes of sunlight a day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people that are being exposed to a lot of artificial light probably should look at doing at least 30 to 45 minutes a day of red light or, sunlight exposure.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't, if you work a lot inside and you're not able to, basically, get outside, I think it's very a wise thing for people to at least purchase a red light. And I tell people this, like, I own a red light company, but red light, all photons basically work. Red light, no matter if it's this cheapest red light panel that someone buys or the best high quality one, you're still going to get a benefit from using red light. So from a budget perspective, red light is extremely beneficial. I tell people that I think that the difference a lot of times is when you get very precise with the actual pulsation of frequencies. That's when you start kind of getting into another level of better benefit. For example, there's, the Schumannic resonance, which is the Earth's frequency. You can basically, it's grounding. So there's panels or red light that you can actually pulse to your hands and your feet at specific wavelengths, like 7.83 hertz, that could be very beneficial. You have different brain waves, people that want to alter their mood, to be able to help out relaxation. You have theta, people that want to meditate and manifest, or kind of things like that. There's alpha waves. Athletes that like energy or want to have better performance, they can look into like gamma waves or beta waves. So there's different wavelengths of red light, or at least frequencies of pulsating that people can look into, that could also be a little bit more of a, precise way to enhance their red light exposure.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, obviously getting outside is a big key. I'm in Chicago right now. The weather, actually, it's been unseasonably warm. We're in December, and I just was looking. It's supposed to be 55 on Friday, which is like unheard of. But I take 2 to 3 walks a day with my dogs, and I'm outside first thing in the morning, and so I'm lucky that I could do that. I think some people need to just carve out a little time to do simple things like that. What type of things do you like to do for yourself? Maybe with like, do you have like a morning routine or something like that?
Yeah, I'm the crazy guy. So, I mean, I wake up every morning at 4.
Okay.
So basically, my routine is wake up at 4. The first thing that I do is, because I do a lot of TBI rehab, I do a lot of gratitude, because like I had a guy today that was a spinal cord patient that he randomly was walking in the woods and a tree fell and hit in the back of the neck and has a spinal cord injury. Now he's paralyzed.
Oh, my.
So you just never know. So I think gratitude is the most important thing that we should all be thankful for, of whatever it is, your current situation, that you should just be grateful that you just have a heartbeat and you woke up. So I do gratitude first thing. The next thing that I do is actually do a cold plunge. I have a pretty, very cold pool right now that I chill out. So I go just do a quick little cold plunge, 5-10 minutes. Then I go straight to the gym. I'm into resistance training, but I do a lot of like extensors. So I do a lot of back, a lot of big, large group muscles. Then I come home and then I do what's called PMF. So pulse electromagnetic frequency. But I actually do PMF to my brain. So I have a device called NeoRhythm. It's a device that was made in Slovenia. I think the company is actually now out of Amsterdam, but it's neat because you can actually use an app on your phone to control your brain waves. And then from that, I do like affirmations. And then I have this big, massive canvas. And this is where I basically do all of my goal planning, visualization, meditation aspect. So I'm very big into a guy named Joe Dispenza. So I do a lot of acoustic brain waves. So basically, whenever I do visualizations and meditation, I actually listen to brainwaves. And then I do something called NanoV. It's this breathing device that you breathe in vaporized water. So there's an infrared laser inside of this glass jar. And then I breathe in vaporized water. And then I do my own red light. So I basically laser my carotids, my cerebellum, my hands, my feet, and my stomach. And then I typically take calls. And then after we finish up, good.
I was just going to say that's it.
Oh, well, I wake up at 4, man.
Hey, you know what? There's things get done first thing, right? Like, I mean, I just wrote down, I tried to keep up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I got 8 things so far.
Yeah, I didn't add in. So, but by the time that stuff, before I get started, now, I'm a big fan of sunrises and sunsets for circadian rhythm. And then at the end of the day, after I finish up my whole routine, then I do sauna before I go to bed. And again, I do another 30-minute round of a red light panel. And yeah, man, that's basically my routine, and I've been doing that. But what happened is I went from having like a bunch of, like I told you, ADHD symptoms and I had some autoimmune issues, and in that, I eat super clean, so I'm a very low carb kind of guy. I like the paleo, carnivore, seasonal eating. I mean, so much I actually have my own restaurant in my community just because. Yeah, well, I travel a lot, but I also want to make sure that when I'm going, my family eats super clean food.
So when do you eat after, do you eat when you get back from the gym, or do you wait, or?
Yeah, so I just eat in the mornings. I do just a little bit of some protein. Typically I do a lot of protein shakes though. And then I do fast, so I do intermittent fasting. So I basically eat breakfast, and then I won't eat until typically I get home, which is about 6:15. And then I try to make sure that after the sun goes down that, I'm not eating anymore until, the next day.
Wow. And yeah, I love how you do affirmations and goal setting and gratitude. So you pretty much start your day with gratitude, which is great. I don't have quite the morning routine that you have, but like, I feel like if people could just take one or two of these things and implement them, not everyone maybe is going to get up at 4 and do 2-hour routine, even if it's a 15-20 minute routine, I think that can be effective.
Yeah. Well, so what happened is I read a book years ago called The Magic of Thinking Big. And I've always been a pretty high achiever. I played college baseball. So I was able to get to that level, but then I got hurt and then I decided to stop. But then, I opened this private practice. And what happened is I had a very large private practice. And after reading this book, I realized that I really accomplished everything that I kind of wanted to from a goal setting. But then I realized that I was thinking too small. So then I challenged myself to see if I can start attracting international patients. And so in doing that, I started trying to focus in on my very first patient was from Queensland, Australia. And it literally took me 2 weeks. I basically went to my office manager and said, all right, look, Brandy, what we're going to do is we're going to get a big map of the world. And we're going to start focus on attracting patients from all over the globe. And I just picked Australia and my first patient was Queensland. And I was like, this is interesting. So then we just started literally putting pins all over the whole world. And then we started attracting all these people randomly would reach out to us on Instagram or Facebook from like Israel or the UAE or Slovenia, Croatia, Ireland, UK. And it was just massive. People started just coming in. And what happened is I started actually in the morning time, I was actually scripting. So basically I was just basically thanking God for sending me these patients. And then all of a sudden they started coming. So then now what's happening is we see over 73 different countries fly in to see me. And in doing that, I realized to start thinking even bigger. So my morning routine, I think everyone, I tell people this, is that if you really, really, really want to grow or you want to even recover from like a terminal illness or any that people really need to actually use first thing in the morning as much as they possibly can into visualizing their future, where you can see yourself going. And that's what I did is I basically picked, I wanted to go to Dubai. And, I spent 5 years actually legitimately watching 4K videos, trying to visualize myself opening up a facility in the UAE. And magically, that actually was able to happen. And my wife was like, Kyle, you need to quit. Like, you need to sleep in. And I'm like, no. And because after 3 years, she was like, one day she wakes up and she's like, it hasn't worked. And I was like, it's going to work. And I was like, it's just not the right timing. And whenever I got an opportunity to take my whole family over there and meet, our partners over there, she was like, this is freaking insane. She's like, you were so dedicated and you never gave up. And I was like, it just takes time. And that's a lot of times when people do these routines is that it's not that it's going to be a quick fix or you're going to like attract or recover or whatever people are looking for. it's the persistency. But I tell people this, it's the faith that you have. I'm a massive fan of Steve Harvey. And Steve Harvey has this one thing about once you make a plan of whatever you want to be in life, you basically, God basically wraps it up and he sends it to you, but you just never know the timing of when you're going to receive this. And if you're on, unfaithful or doubting street, it's impossible street, it's never going to come. But if you're on that faith street, and you stay on that faith street and you never get off of it, eventually that's going to come. And that's what happened with us. We built this laser company that's now completely all over the world and all these patients. But my partner and I knew that one day, by us educating people on social media, that people would realize that we weren't crazy, that we were doing scientific stuff, but it was the repetitive, the results that people are like, all right, we're going to give these guys a shot. And then boom, now we travel to teach all these people. But it all came from the consistency of, every day grinding it out, trying to build a blueprint until eventually now it's like crazy that everything that we wrote down and we visualized and we talked about and we dreamed of is now a reality. And it's cool because we're making an impact all over the world. And at the end of the day, helping other people achieve their goals is ultimately the best reward you can have.
Yeah. And focusing on that over and over. And it's like, I think a lot of people don't put their mindset to doing that, or they start and they give up, or they don't continually focus on the one thing or whatever that they want to get. And it just takes, like you said, persistence.
Yeah, success is, I tell my staff, success is a habit. You don't look at an Olympic athlete and say they did it overnight. Those people put 6-8 hours every single day. They're the ones, even in college, they were outworking everyone else. And, and if you ask them whenever they win a gold medal, and it's like, my cousin's actually an Olympic athlete, Jenny Finch, and she knew she literally saw herself with holding gold medals. And she did. And when I work with athletes, I always ask them, I'm like, dude, tell me your story. And it's always the same thing. It's like they knew they were going to be there. Like when they would go to sleep at night, they'd close their eyes and they knew they could see themselves, wearing number 5 and playing in the Super Bowl, or, striking someone out to win the World Series. Like they knew. And that's the cool thing about the mind. When I work with these spinal cord patients, like I love to work with spinal cord patients because I'm like, look, man, all you have to do is really, really tap in. Like, can you see your foot move? And they're like, no. I'm like, look, your foot's not going to move until you see it. And then I use virtual reality a lot with these patients to where I put them into VR. So I desensitize their brain to where they're not getting any abnormal. And I literally have like a foot and a hand virtually moves. And I trick the brain into thinking that the hand's moving or the foot. And then we put them out of VR and I'm like, all right, now try to get your foot or hand to move. And they're like, oh my God, my finger can move. And it's like, yeah, but it's the power of visualization. But when you see something, the brain doesn't know if it's real or not. And with VR, when you see this virtual hand move, the brain's like, whoa. And we vibrate their hand whenever we're moving their hand, and their brain starts to move their fingers. And yeah, man, that's probably the coolest thing about, what I get to do is tap in and like motivate people. It's like, you just never know. And it's just like, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. Yeah, just the consistency of it.
And getting up at 4, what time do you go to sleep? I'm just curious.
And I'm typically 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Okay. Got it. And what about helping people with sleep? Like we talked about your morning routine. Obviously, they're all sort of tied together, like getting up in the morning and seeing sunlight can actually help you set your circadian rhythm so you can actually get better sleep. But what type of sleep routine do you have, or do you coach with individuals?
Yeah. So main thing is I actually, I do a QEG. So I monitor their brainwave and I show people that most people who actually have sleep deficits typically have excessive high beta waves. So high beta waves are like your fight or flight. Like if you're exposed to a tiger, you're stressed out. And the way the brain basically kind of goes, and you have like, if someone's like that, their brain is in high beta, then the next brainwave below that's called beta. which is like alertness, like you and I are on right now. Then you go into an alpha wave, which is more kind of like a relaxation. Then you go into theta, which is that drowsiness. Then you go into a delta wave. And a lot of patients who have sleep disturbances, their brain can't actually go down into that delta rhythm. So delta is when you're able to actually like sleep. It's your like REM sleep. So what I actually recommend a lot of patients do is typically listen to theta acoustic or theta binaural, theta isochromic tone. So I actually train them to do sound waves, basically. So theta waves. I do actually recommend that people who do have sleep disturbances that after the sun goes down to minimize all blue light exposure. So all artificial light, just use a candle if you have to. The other first thing is that you mentioned circadian rhythm, waking up early in the morning, watching the sunrise, and then also watching sunsets. Typically about 3 to 5 days of consistency of doing that can really help out. I'm a very big fan of actually taking serotonin precursors. So like stuff like 5-HTP. I'm a big fan of fish oil. I'm a very big fan of actually gut health. I think that a lot of people who have sleep disturbances have what's called SIBO. They have abnormal gut bacteria. So taking really good probiotics or getting, meeting a functional medicine doctor, getting stool samples to clean the gut up. If people don't have the finances to do that or, they want to do that, then low carb diets, basically paleo diet, seasonal eating. Those are some pretty good things. And then I use the Magnetico sleep pad. So it's actually a 100-pound magnet and it's amazing. I'm a very big fan of, there's a really good book. It's called the Mitochondriac Manifesto. Yeah. I don't know if you ever read that book, but it's by name R.D. Lee. Randy, the Mito Man.
R.D. Lee?
R.D. Lee. Yeah, and the book is really based off of a neurosurgeon named Jack Kruse. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's pretty big on YouTube at Red Light. But this book is phenomenal. But I think that anyone out there who really wants to hijack their life or biohack their life back, this book, the Mitochondriac Manifesto, is unbelievable. But yeah, so I sleep on this Magnetico sleep pad. It's a 100-pound magnet. The whole concept of this Magnetico sleep pad was based off of grounding. Back in the day, everyone slept on dirt floors and you had like a wooden bed, which was attached to the dirt. And now we're on concrete. Now we have, EMFs and Wi-Fi and all that. I think that, those do have, on some individuals can disrupt some of their biophysiology. So even, cutting your Wi-Fi router off could potentially help you out. But this Magnetico sleep pad.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. So you're just putting this on top of the bed?
So you put it, so your box spring, and then you put the Magnetico sleep pad on top of that, and then you put your mattress on top of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, man, it's wild. That I feel that they were showing some research. Actually, I wrote this down because I was going to tell you. So the research from this was showing that it would reduce free radical, which is basically a lot of inflammation and stress, by 80% at 3 p.m. It would increase beta endorphins by 45% and increase serotonin levels by 24%. And it would decrease cortisol by 12%. All from research from this Magnetico sleep pad. So again, for me, I research like crazy. When I happened to come across this, I was like, look, let me try it out because I've been doing PMFs for a long period of time. But this has been a complete game changer. Because, dude, I travel international like crazy. It's not uncommon for me to be here in America. I'll fly to Dubai for 3 or 4 days, come back, home for a week, go to the UK for a week, fly back. 2 weeks later, I'm in Croatia, fly back. 2 weeks later, I'm in Sydney, Australia, fly back. Like I do a lot of international travel, and people ask me about jet lag, and I'm like, look, man, I figured out how to beat jet lag. I can literally fly somewheres, and what I do is when I fly, I typically leave on like a Friday. I make it there Saturday. I go try to get sunlight, and then Sunday, I basically just kind of recuperate a little bit. But this was crazy. I start working on Monday. I work till Friday, and I fly right back, and I'm back to practice in my practice on a Monday. And I do that nonstop.
You bring the
And
pad with you? I'm sorry.
what I would do is that I fly actually with a PMF pad. So that's one of the things that's very interesting about jet lag is, you basically here in one place, you're on the ground, you got magneticism, and you get on an airplane and then you go either, forward or backwards in time. What I do is I literally put this Magnetico sleep pad, or not sleep pad, for the pad I use the OmniRhythm PMF pad. I put it on the bottom of my feet and I use the 7.83 hertz shamanic resonance, and I fly. And then soon as I land, I basically do sunlight exposure. So I try to always just go watch the sunrise, sunset. But I go into a park and go barefoot, which, a lot of people look at me like I'm weird, but, I'm trying to basically hijack my sleep cycle. And that's one way, man, that I've beat. And then I sleep when I'm back home on the Magnetico sleep pad. Man, it is insane because people ask me, they're like, dude, I literally just saw you were in Croatia, Saturday. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm back to work on Monday. And I do this like, I think I had like 150 some thousand flight miles just this year.
Wow. And this sleep pad, so you're putting it just under the mattress, so you don't even know it's there, really.
Yeah, no, you don't really know it's there. And there's some people there when you read the actual research, some people actually who have like chronic illnesses, it's probably best to put it like underneath your bed originally because it does detoxify you. Which is very interesting because you got to think about like you're sleeping on a magnet, and then as you breathe, you basically look at your chest. So it actually helps. There's something called the lymphatic system, basically how our brain gets rid of all the lymph and stuff. So it does help out detoxify you. So most people who are constipated or people who maybe have like methylation issues or glutathione issues, this stuff will help with detoxifying. So initially, it's very important to make sure you drink a lot of water, sleeping on this magnet. But yeah, it's amazing. People literally lose weight. I mean, that's when you read this book, this guy literally lost a lot of weight by literally sleeping on a freaking magnet.
Always something. It's crazy.
Always something.
God, I'm trying to think where we should go from here. So what would you say? I mean, you do a lot of biohacking and, I would say 99% of the people aren't doing these things. What would you say the biggest levers are that, you use that you've seen with your practice and with individuals? I know you're working with specific people who have obviously some needs whether it's brain, traumatic brain injuries or things like that, but just maybe the everyday person, what are some of maybe the biggest sort of levers that they can do on a day-to-day basis? And I know you've mentioned some of them already, but.
Well, another thing I haven't mentioned is something called deuterium-depleted water. Are you familiar with that?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm a massive fan of that. I mean, I'm not drinking it right now, but I think that people who get access to drinking that, just because what people don't realize is that we live in a toxic world. So people really need to be able to be very mindful about their body's ability to be able to detoxify. So again, I like deuterium-depleted water. But just basic common things. I really think sunlight exposure is something that people really, really need to amp up. I think that can make a significant difference in their vitamin D, their energy levels, sleep cycle. People even know cold exposure first thing in the morning. I tell people that, you have to do cold plunges, but just even doing like, ice packs to your carotid arteries for like, just 1 to couple of minutes. That's just enough to be able to kind of help boost an energy production with you. Reducing light exposure after sundown can make a massive, massive difference. And then I think, again, just basic seasonal eating, people trying to go to like the, farmer's market,
Right.
on the weekends and actually buying like local foods, those are some basic little things. And then again, if people can, invest a little bit in red light exposure, I'm a massive fan of that. At least just exposing, worst case, tell people if you only had like one place to basically put red light, I would tell it to put it to your stomach, just because, we wear clothes all the time and we don't really, the summertime people get their, abdomens exposed, but, it's very interesting as this because if you obviously follow that, but you go to the beach, you feel so good at the beach. And, if you're typically wearing a bathing suit, but I massively am a massive fan of sunlight exposure to the stomach or red light to the stomach. Reduce all the inflammation in the gut because that can reduce inflammation and stress to the brain.
Mm. Yeah, that and nowadays, like for example, we're not seeing the sun much, but even just getting outside, you're still getting exposed to the sun. It's just not, it's behind the clouds, obviously. It's not but yeah, no, these are all great things. I mean,
I'll just say that. I mean, my favorite thing. So this is, but here's my. I do a significant amount of red light exposure to my carotids.
Yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, he's demonstrating it. That's cool. Yeah, I have a light, and mine I'm sort of just sitting in front of it. But yeah, that one's looks like you could do more targeted red light.
Yeah, this is like the Mac Daddy, and then the other one is behind the we call this area in neurology. This is like where we do like the cerebellum, but this is the vertebral artery here in here. But these are my favorite two places that I basically do red light exposure. I'm the crazy guy that even I have two kids. I have a 7 and 3-year-old. Both of my kids, when they were born in the hospital, like I literally brought my laser, and my kids have been lasered every day.
Okay.
So my daughter.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was gonna say my daughter. She FaceTimed her friend, and she's like, I'm in front of a red light panel and that, and she's like, "Why is your house so red?" And she's like, "My dad's weird."
Hey, you know what? Nothing wrong with being weird, right?
Oh, for sure.
And does your wife do a lot of this stuff as well, or she...
Not as much as, I mean, she likes to laser, women like, cosmetics for wrinkling and stuff. But that's basically about, she thinks I'm just crazy. She's like, I don't know why you would have, the earthly idea, even on a Saturday and Sunday, to wake up at 4:00 in the morning.
Yeah. But, I mean, so much can get done when you're up early like that. Like you said, I mean, I wrote down your morning routine. I mean, crazy. I do value sleep, so sometimes I don't like to get up that early, but yeah, get things done, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, this was great. I mean, what this is a common question I'll just finish up with. What one tip would you give someone, even though we've gotten a lot of tips today, someone maybe looking to get their body or mind back to what it once was? I know this, you could probably give a bunch of different tips, but what one tip would you give that individual?
I would say probably, my favorite book. I think education is by far probably the most important thing. My favorite, I'm going to give you two books because Why Isn't My Brain Working by Datis Karazian and Clean Gut by Dr. Alexander Junger. Those are my top two books for health. I would say from a mindset and mind control would be Supernatural by Joe Dispenza.
Mm-hmm. I know that one.
Those are some pretty good books. And then when you go into biohacking, I mean, I think that the best thing that someone could potentially do is potentially probably, I think the Magnetico sleep pad is, a game changer just because of it basically adds polarity to your body. And, the sicker we get, the less energy we have. And the most, restorative, time of our day is in our sleep. So why not try to add electrons into your body when you're sleeping? And I think that that's a missing link. And then outside of that, red light exposure, at least if you could 30 minutes, 45 minutes a day to at least your stomach, your back, and your carotids. You got me.
I'm going to be doing it right after this interview. That's for sure.
It makes a difference. And, I would say this, from my personal perspective, I run I do a lot of labs. I think that probably one of the next biggest health epidemics that we're going to see is actually going to be fungal infections. I don't think that people realize how bad mold exposure is, whether it's coming from the air quality in someone's home, water damaged buildings, old buildings. And then the other thing is actually our food source, that people don't realize how much mold or mycotoxins is in carbohydrates and coffee and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard about that with coffee. And coffee's the most consumed, probably the most consumed beverage, of anything.
Ochratoxin A is one of the most common mold exposures that I have seen globally. I mean, like I work with autistic kids that are nonverbal, and I have yet to actually see an autistic kid, and this is all over the world, that hasn't tested positive for ochratoxin A, which is mold, and that's all these kids eat is basically carbohydrates.
Mm. Yeah, so knowing your food source.
Totally.
Right. Well, Dr. Daigle, this was great. Where's the best place for people to find you? I know you have a lot going on. What website should they visit?
Yeah, so we have, a couple, Instagram is definitely a great way because I have, Dr. Kyle Daigle, that has a Popple page which has links to like everything. Neuro-solution.com is our red light company. My practice actually is neurosolutionlc.com. And, and then I have a drkyledaigle.com LLC. It's actually, they just took it down and now it's getting revamped, but those are some great ways. And then, I also have another software company. It's called Neurosage. So, neurosage.com. We actually make video games for achieving wellness. Basically, it's using sound waves, acoustic, and visual and eye movements that you can play video games at your own, in your own home to help out reducing pain and discomfort and improving cognitive function.
Okay. Well, I'll put these in the show notes so people can find you if they want to reach out. And I appreciate you coming on the show and going through your routine and sharing all this knowledge for us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Brian, for having me.
Yeah, thanks, and enjoy the day.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.